I think the challenge of this episode, Alex, is going to be keeping it concise because I've ended up down a research rabbit hole with sleep and James Bond. And I know you've done the same with your own experiences with sleep and the coping strategies that you've found. That's right, isn't it?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, so much to cover. And this has been kind of a lifelong uh, issue, I guess I want to say. I don't want to, but yeah, yeah, you'll take care of the James Bond references. I'll take care of some of the technical sleep and insomnia references. We'll be pretty good there because I told you before, I read all the books. I can't quite remember the references according to sleep or insomnia or whatever in a lot of the books. And the only thing I can think of from the movies is when Daniel Craig stays up all night drinking Vespers on an airplane in Quantum of Solace, which is probably the only time he showed some superhuman quality.
You say superhuman though. For me, that's one of the most vulnerable moments of Bond, where he's just acknowledging that he actually can't sleep. He can do all of these things. He's so capable in Quantum of Solace, but he can't sleep, which is one of the most human things. You know, if we don't sleep, we die. Essentially, I know. We're going to get into the science of sleep, I know, but if you don't sleep, you die, and people have died from not sleeping. That's probably not what.
We might get into a controversy there because technically that's not true in some way.
Okay.
According to that, because I've done a lot of research in this, there are circumstances that may have led them to that, but that's not why they expired, so to speak.
I don't want any insomniacs, and I think both of us can count ourselves within that, somewhere within that camp. I don't want any insomniacs who have heard that and thought, oh, that's giving me any more anxiety about lack of sleep because I might die from lack of sleep. When I'm there at 3 o'clock in the morning, unable to sleep sometimes, one of the things I always tell myself is, you're not going to die, even if you don't get back to sleep and you have to go to work the next day. We'll be fine. You will get through it. But I understand there have been a very, very small number of people through history have been incapable of sleeping, and that it hasn't worked out very well for them. But I'm sure we'll get into the science side of things. So
we'll get into all of that. And that's definitely been a factor in my life as well.
So if you hadn't gathered by now, we're talking about sleep today, which is not a small topic. When I started this series on Our Minds Only, I thought they're going to be like 20, 30 minutes. And some of the episodes are that, and some of the episodes are not. I can tell you categorically, this is not going to be one of those short episodes because sleep in James Bond is something that's fascinated me for a very long time. I think it's one of the things about the character that I've related to most. And there's quite a few of those aspects, and particularly from the books, less so the films, because in the films you actually don't see James Bond getting healthy natural sleep very often. You more often than not in the films see James Bond being knocked unconscious, and this happens to every single Bond. I actually went through, and I'm not going to list them, don't worry, but I went through every single James Bond to find examples of where he gets knocked unconscious, just to kind of prove it to myself. But that's the image that you have from the films. James Bond waking up is usually because a villain has knocked him unconscious and he didn't have any choice about going to sleep.
Or drugged.
Drugged. Yeah, I mean, I think Timothy Dalton probably does the best kind of waking up after being drugged performances in the films. The stiff competition from the other five main guys as well. But yeah, he gets drugged an awful lot. Two films, gets drugged an awful lot, but in the books it's a bit more nuanced than that. So I actually went through, for this podcast, I went through the whole of Fleming, and do you know how many references to sleep I actually found in the whole of Fleming?
No.
Have a guess. It's going to be too high. 7. Did you say 7?
Yeah.
7. No, try over 400.
What?
There are more than 400 references to sleep, which means that an average of around 30 a book. Some books have more than others. So Goldfinger and On a Magic
Secret. This is just Ian Fleming.
That's just Ian Fleming, 14 books. 400 direct references to sleep, as in the word sleep. Now, most of those are to do with actual sleeping, which is what we're talking about today, as in getting your head down and getting a good night's sleep, or trying to anyway. Some of those references, particularly in Casino Royale, interestingly, are about having sex with somebody. That's not what we're talking about today. So it's important to make that distinction. Some of the books have a lot more references than others. So the plots of Goldfinger, where there's it's actually in the book, it's poisoning the water rather than a nerve gas. The idea of putting the town to sleep. That's a lot of sleep references. And On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which has the hypnosis going on in there. So that happens during sleep. So those books have a lot more uses of the word sleep than the others. But across the books, there's so many references to sleep. In fact, my kind of working hypothesis with this is because sleep is such a natural part of everyday existence for everybody. I think we don't even notice those references when we're reading. It's almost like breathing. It's such a natural thing that we don't even notice it. But Fleming seems to be quite obsessed with sleep and lack of sleep in the books. So does that surprise you that there's so many?
Yeah, it does surprise me. It makes me think he must have had some serious issues with sleep. Mm. And considering his alcohol consumption now, it doesn't surprise me.
And I know we're going to get into the impact that alcohol has on sleep as well, because again, one of those instances in this series of Bond perhaps not being the best role model when it comes to that, and we'll share our own experiences of that. But I think probably before we kind of get stuck into anything more in any detail, what is this was again something that came from you, Alex. You wanted to do this episode about sleep. So we haven't talked about this in advance of recording. This is always the exciting thing about this series. I never quite know where people are going to take things, but I know that you've had an interesting relationship with sleep over your lifetime. Is that right?
Oh, definitely. First, thank you for having me back on this series again. This series has been so amazing and so invaluable for so many people, including myself. The last episode when Natasha was just spectacular. I couldn't believe it when I was listening to it. It was just wonderful. So again, thanks. And the fact that I'm doing a second appearance makes me, yeah, I've had a lot of issues in my life. Lots of issues. That's all I can say. My poor suffering wife has to deal with it.
To be honest, though, I think most people watching and listening to these, and you're right, we have had so much great feedback on this series. A lot of it private, some of it public, but so many people that I thought I've got to know through the Bond community, but I didn't know half of what was going on in their lives, and it's lovely that people are now starting to share those things more. So I think it's actually been quite a quite a humbling experience for me, actually. For this series to have that impact on people.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so to get into this one, sleep has definitely been an issue in my life. Probably my whole life. I was always very much a night owl. I was born in Spain, in Barcelona, and might have had, I mean, I left when I was a baby, so one would think that you didn't have an impact, but I think it did. Also because my parents are of a Spanish heritage. We were night owls. We stayed up late. We ate dinner late, which is a very common thing if you go into Mediterranean countries, especially Spain and Greece. It's very common not to eat until after 9 o'clock at night. And that's how I, spent my life growing up. I mean, even my parents said when I was a baby, I wouldn't. It could be midnight and I'm still up as a baby, and they're like desperately trying to get me to sleep. And I knew that even as a very young child, I would be bouncing off the walls at 11 o'clock at night, jumping up and down on the bed, tons of energy. Still now to this day, 10 o'clock, and I wake up. I have a second wind and I end up cleaning. That's when I clean the house. Everybody's like ready to go to bed, and I'm buzzing around cleaning everything. So it's always been an issue. It became a serious, and again, it's been a lot of the times in my life, I would have periods of insomnia where maybe it would be a couple of days. I would stay up all night. maybe 1 or 2 nights in a row, rarely. And I would, kind of like, okay, I knew the next night I would get a good night's sleep. During the COVID lockdown is when it really came to a head. I had a period where I did not sleep for 3, maybe almost 4 days straight.
Wow.
Zero sleep. I was up all night. I was freaking out. I was getting very, very flustered. I was getting very angry. I was getting very irritated. And it was a real problem. I ended up having to go to, I went to a series of doctors. They didn't know what to do. I was online constantly trying to figure this out. It turned out there were almost no physical conditions except for one type of cancer that literally causes insomnia. And I was like, okay, so I'm not physically, there's no physical sickness that's causing, that's what I was scared of. And I went to a psychiatrist. He ended up prescribing me Ambien. Not fun, but it worked. And I was starting to sleep. But I knew this was not a long-term solution. And was getting so desperate, I finally went to online, I tracked down like one of the top sleep specialists in the country. He happened to be in New York, but again, this was very much, I think, during the lockdown or very close around it. So he wasn't seeing patients in person. So we did a Zoom thing, and within 20 minutes, he's like, "Oh, you have insomnia." And I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. That's what I'm coming to you for.
Tell me something I don't know.
Yeah, tell me something I don't know. And he said, well, there's no physical, and he reiterated, there is no physical cause, that it is a psychological issue. And that really the only clinical studies that they've ever done, and the only clinical studies that they've seen that can cure insomnia, was something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, ETI. And I had heard of it, and at that time that was in my investigations. And so I just went about finding a local CBTI therapist that knew how to handle it. And when I went through it, yeah, it worked. It worked really well. In fact, I was surprised. I signed up for 10 sessions. In 8 sessions, I was off the Ambien. Wow. And I didn't know, and I was terrified because at the time, I was terrified that I could not sleep without it. That I could not sleep without sleeping. Now, okay, let's go back a little bit. So preface this. Even years before that, when I would go through these sleep issues, I would take over-the-counter sleeping pills. Still, not a great solution. Short-term, maybe if you're desperate. But even those over-the-counter stuff, they don't have a good track record with brain health and brain function in the long term. They can actually severely impact your brain health. There are links to dementia and Alzheimer's with those medications. Right. There are definitely strong links with dementia and Alzheimer's with things like Ambien and heavier sleeping pills. There have been strong links between brain degeneration and sleeping pills. So again, not a long-term solution. So yeah, like I said, this was something that I had struggled with my whole life. As we know from the previous episodes, also dealing with anxiety and stress and minor or short bouts of depression. I played a factor.
Yeah, but I've always said I'm a rubbish sleeper. The difference between me and you is that I am a morning person and not a night owl. So I've read a little, there's actually a really good book actually by a guy called Matthew Walker called The Science of Sleep. Yeah.
I know him.
Yeah. Oh, you actually know Matthew?
Know of him.
You know of him. Yeah.
I know of him. I've seen many of his videos, and I hate to say it. So Okay, go ahead. Let me finish and I'll tell you about my Matthew Walker story.
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of what I know about the science of sleep is from his book, The Science of
Yeah.
Sleep. So I'm taking what Matthew has written as read. I have written, I've read, sorry, a lot of other things about sleep and watched a lot of videos about sleep, but it's his book that if I'm ever unsure of something, I always think understanding the science of something is really important for being able to change something in your life. So and that book it wasn't even published that long ago, but that book for me had a really life-changing effect in terms of understanding why well, it actually explains what sleep is, you know, the release of the chemicals that's required to actually send you to sleep and all the rest of it. And I did make quite a lot of significant lifestyle changes as a result of reading that book. But it also made me realize things like, for instance, apparently about 40% of people are night owls, 30% are morning people. Larks, isn't it? I think Matthew refers to them as. And then there's 30% of people.
Chronotype. Yeah,
That's it.
chronotype.
Yeah. So 30% of people are kind of interchangeable, but some people are quite hardwired into being morning or evening people. I am such a morning person. I'm so much more awake at 5 o'clock in the morning than 5 o'clock in the evening. It's untrue. Like it gets to even this time, you know, it's just gone 7 p.m. here in the UK. And I was like, can we not start too late, Alex, doing this recording?
Yeah, sorry about that.
After about 8 p.m., 9 p.m., my brain just leaks out of my ears. I'm just not an evening night person at all. If I require kind of rational, sensible thought, it needs to happen much, you know, before lunchtime, really. I'm such a morning person. But but like you, I've always had difficulty sleeping. I have had really extreme bouts of insomnia. There were a couple of episodes again during COVID, and it was not just related to COVID, but also some family stuff which I couldn't control. And I did have some nights where I didn't go to sleep. I did go to work the next morning and just functioned throughout the whole day, badly, probably, but I literally just went through the whole night being unable to sleep. I'm so eager to hear what I've done a course of CBT, but not specifically related to sleep. So when we eventually get to that, I'm so fascinated to hear what it was that actually had that impact on you.
Well, again, during the COVID thing, two factors happened. One, I was listening to a lot of Matthew Walker videos and lectures, and he freaked me out. Him telling about the dangers of not sleeping and knowing that I had this insomnia issue made it so much worse. And I was desperately trying to find any video of him saying, how does one get to sleep? And the only thing at the time was him saying how bad it was for not sleeping and all the dangers and all the disease and you're shortening your life and blah, 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 blah. And this, and it literally just sent spiral. And I got to the point where I was going to like get a vendetta out against Matthew Walker. I wanted to like hire a hitman because they're like, dude, you're killing me. You're freaking me out. And you're not telling me how to get to sleep. And it literally just sent me into a terrible situation where I was just completely freaked out by this guy. The other thing, and I didn't know what it was, I didn't know this was an issue at the time, was my wife and I were doing something called this Wim Hof method. So we're stuck in our house, and he's this yoga guy from like Denmark, crazy. He's like a crazy man, but he was doing these breathing techniques where he could submerge himself into ice for like 40 minutes, and his body temperature remains the same. And he's been scientifically studied. Yes, he can really do this. And it's all these breathing focused exercises where you breathe and then you slowly learn how to take cold showers, right? We wanted to, something Bond does, you know, something James Bond does, cold shower. Well, it's not something that you do just right away. You got to build up to it. And through these breathing methods, you can actually sustain a cold shower for several minutes, ice cold.
Wow.
And my wife actually did it. I got to be honest. She was amazing. She was able to take like a 3-minute cold shower, ice cold. And I got to maybe a minute and a half, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is insane. But What I didn't know, and when I went to that psychiatrist and he told me, okay, first, those breathing methods were developed by Tibetan monks, and they would sit in the, and I remember seeing a documentary of these Tibetan monks sitting in ice caves, putting wet robes around them and seeing the steam rise off their body. So they're literally sitting in an ice cave and wrapped in wet cloth, and they're heating up. Unbelievable. But it's something that's been documented can happen. He also said that it activates your sympathetic, I can't remember if it was the sympathetic or the parasympathetic. I think the sympathetic nervous system, which heightens your sense of awareness and wakes you up. Where you want to have your parasympathetic system activated to slow you down and bring you into a calm relaxation. You're doing the reverse of what you need to be doing. And he also said, if you have anxiety, the Wim Hof method is the worst thing you could do for your anxiety. All it's going to do is activate the wrong part of your brain. And he said, stay away from that. That is not what you need to be doing. If you don't have anxiety, it's fine, it's great, it's healthy. If you do, stay away. And I was doing the absolute wrong thing. So I sort of, this two-pronged thing where I had already an insomnia issue. I had Matt Walker freaking me out, and I had Wim Hof activating the wrong part of my brain. I was awake for a week. Almost, no joke. And so that's when I ended up having to go to the psychiatrist, and then which led me to the CBT therapy eventually, which actually helped me to reverse it. Now, through this, I also take melatonin. Again, melatonin is, and I only take 1 milligram of a time released, but even that, it's not that harmful, but over a long period of time, they don't know. You know, they just don't know if it's that healthy for you over like many years. And I've been taking melatonin, Jesus, for a decade now or more.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm now slowly starting to wean finally off the melatonin, and rather successfully, I would say. I'm not getting the greatest night's sleep, but I am successfully sleeping without it. I've had a few nights.
It's interesting you highlight the link with anxiety. And again, I'm no doctor here, so please don't take anything I say in this episode, or indeed any of the other episodes of this, as the words of someone who's an expert on this. I'm just a passionate amateur who reads a lot. But the links with anxiety are so obvious in hindsight, I suppose. I didn't realize, obviously, as a child, because I was a bad sleeper as a child and a teenager, I didn't realize that what was going on with my anxiety was also affecting my sleep. I didn't make those connections. It's really interesting in the Bond novels, there's a pattern across the novels that I've spotted going through and finding all 400 references in Fleming to Sleep. There's a pattern, because a lot of people think, and in fact, I've read this in several people's articles, a lot of people think that, and this sometimes plays into people's fantasy of being James Bond, he doesn't have trouble sleeping. Whereas actually the general pattern is that he doesn't have trouble sleeping. In fact, Fleming uses the word troubled and untroubled throughout the books a lot as well. So usually in about the first half of the books, Bond has untroubled sleep without dreams, which is also a bit of a problem, because we'll get to that, I'm sure, talking about why dreams are actually quite important for emotional regulation and everything else. So it's a bit of a problem if James Bond isn't dreaming, but hey ho. So he has untroubled sleep, and then in the second half of the books, his sleep starts becoming troubled, because obviously he's getting embroiled in the villain's plot and the danger, inherent with that. So Bond becomes much a less good sleeper, if that's not really poor grammar, but a less good sleeper throughout the Bond stories. And it's really interesting because people read Bond stories and kind of take away the parts of themselves that they want to take away from it, or what fantasy they want to live up to. For me, I always focused on the bits where Bond couldn't sleep, because I couldn't sleep as a teenager reading these books for the first times. So that always kind of, that was the bit of Bond. I always assumed Bond was a really bad sleeper, but actually what happens in the stories is he's not a bad sleeper. There are exceptions, like You Only Live Twice. He's completely, destroyed mentally because of what's happened with Tracy, and similar to what you just said. He's not sleeping. There's no kind of external cause. It is psychological. And he's having trouble kind of reconciling himself to that fact at the start of You Only Live Twice. But most of the time, Bond starts off a story being able to sleep, and then as the story goes on, doesn't sleep. There's some interesting endings of Bond stories where Bond does actually fall asleep, and sometimes in the arms of the woman without actually having sex with her. So that's a kind of an interesting variation on it. But it's almost like the Bond stories are kind of like James Bond trying to get a good night's sleep. We see them as these kind of heroic adventures of a guy fighting this big evil, but actually maybe we could reframe the whole of Bond as just a guy trying to get a good night's sleep.
It is interesting when I think about all the Bond novels, and if I take them in order, you're not seeing a guy who's evolving upwards. If anything, he's going downwards.
Yeah.
From every book onward, he's getting slightly more torn apart, slightly more, getting worse and a little worse and a little worse and a little worse until he hits a rock bottom and You Only Live Twice.
Yeah.
And then we think he's going to start coming back up in Man with the Golden Gun, but unfortunately, Mr. Fleming passed away before he could actually really complete that story. But yeah, it's actually almost you're reading a person's kind of downward slide through each novel, each book. And I guess does his sleep get worse and worse in each
Pretty
story?
much, yeah. So, I mean, the story where he actually doesn't, everyone thinks James Bond's such a formulaic story. He kills the villain, gets the girl. Well, at the end of Thunderball, in the second half of the novels, maybe the second half, he actually falls asleep on Domino, and they never actually they don't actually have sex at the end of that book. The last sentence of that book is he was already asleep. With the last paragraph, he was already asleep with his head cradled on the inside of his forearm. The girl watched the dark, rather cruel face for a moment. Then she gave a small sigh, pulled the pillow to the edge of the bed so that it was just above him, laid her head down so that she could see him whenever she wanted to, and closed her eyes. It's a really, really nice moment, I think, where two people who feel really safe with each other can finally rest. There's a comparable moment in From Russia with Love, which I tried to imagine this actually happening on film with Terence Young directing Sean Connery, and I couldn't imagine it. So there's this amazing moment in From Russia with Love where Bond, he's so on edge and unable to sleep. The only way that he can actually sleep is to lay his head in Tatiana's lap and give her the gun and get a few hours sleep because he's so exhausted. And she's the one who keeps the gun held at the door, the entrance to the compartment, and actually allows him to sleep in her lap. So there are all these really human moments in the Fleming books where sleep is so important to Bond and his job and his effectiveness at his job. But that's something that you don't tend to get in the films as much.
No, well, the film Bond and the book Bond are very different characters.
Yeah.
And it's funny how it always surprised me how human the book Bond is, and the fact that he needs to have the comfort of another person, usually a woman, in order to find a comfortable space for him to sleep is very telling. Because I remember, like in the first one of these videos with talking about that awareness, it was you know, when you have that heightened sense of awareness, that heightened uh, uh,
Hypervigilance. So
hypervigilance. Thank
yeah,
you.
as Blake talked about in episode 1 of
Right.
this series, and even if you just, I think the opening chapter of Casino Royale is so, it's just so important to establish so much about the James Bond character, but particularly when you look at it like I did researching for this podcast for sleep. So he's so hyper vigilant in that chapter. He jumps into his hotel room, and the
Yeah.
empty room sneers at him, like
Yeah.
laughing at the fact that he's been so hyper vigilant. But
Yeah.
then when he eventually settles into bed and he calms himself down, he still
Yeah.
spends, Fleming says he spends 10 minutes lying on his left side, reflecting on the events of the day. And then he then eventually slides his gun underneath the pillow, which is, creating that feeling of safety, and then was
Mhm.
able to actually kind of relax his face and sleep. But what I
Yeah.
found was really interesting, which I hadn't really noticed in this way before, until we'd started talking a little bit before today about sleep. Fleming uses the sentence, then he turned over and focused his mind towards the tunnel of sleep. So for me, and I know CBT wasn't a thing in 1953, but some of the same ideas, and Fleming was fascinated by early psychology. But I'm really interested to hear about what you did to kind of change your approach to sleep, because it sounds like whatever focused his mind on, and that's really broad, but Fleming was very, very conscious of, there has to be some kind of conscious effort sometimes to be able to switch your mind on to sleep.
Yeah. Well, this comes into the realm of like sleep hygiene. So even before this, I was trying to get, you do some research on what is good sleep hygiene, and they always say an hour before you sleep, turn the lights down. Don't look at screens
Yeah.
because that's a blue light that inhibits melatonin production in your brain. So an hour before sleep, turn off all the screens, start turning the light down, turn the temperature of the room up to about 65 Fahrenheit, about 18 Celsius, or turn it down to about 65 Fahrenheit, 18 Celsius. It should be around that area in terms of temperature, because it also makes it easier to sleep if you're too cold than too hot. Avoid caffeine in the afternoon. Avoid drinking several
The
hours before sleep.
the caffeine thing was the thing that one of the things I changed after I read the Matthew Walker book. I know some people, like Anthony, my husband, is nowhere near as susceptible to caffeine as I am. He can drink a Pepsi at like 8 o'clock at night and still get to sleep. If I
Oh,
did that,
wow.
there would be absolutely no chance. So caffeine, which I didn't realize, I've always never drank until I read the Matthew Walker book. I didn't drink coffee after about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Now I never drink it past 12, 1 o'clock, because
Yeah.
I know now that caffeine has Matthew Walker describes it as a radioactive half-life. And
Yeah.
essentially there will still be caffeine in your system 12 hours after you've consumed it. So
Absolutely.
I now never drink coffee after lunchtime for that reason. And it has been quite helpful, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember my grandfather, who was Cuban, and he would have an espresso every night before bed. Slept like a baby. Who the heck? I have limited my espressos to maybe 1:30. Sometimes I've skirted to 2 o'clock, but really I should be at 12. That's it. Cut off. No more caffeine, no more. Like one of the things when I was in college, I mean, I had to, I'm dyslexic, so I had to read a lot. And one of the ways I did that is I was just on Coca-Cola all day long in the library, just drinking like almost like a 6-pack of Coke a day. It was just ridiculous. But just to keep myself, wired enough to read. But yeah, getting rid of caffeine after a certain hour is very important. And again, alcohol it does inhibit your sleep. It doesn't make you sleepy. It actually inhibits your sleep. And even if it does make you sleep initially, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night. It's not going to be good. And probably cutting off alcohol maybe a couple of hours before bed is a good idea. And definitely,
If I remember correctly, so caffeine inhibits the absorption of adenosine, which is the chemical you actually need to get to sleep. So clearly my adenosine, nothing's getting through if I've had any caffeine. Alcohol, isn't it the second half of your sleep cycle where you actually tend to do most of your dreaming? So dreaming sorts out, if I remember the science correctly, dreaming basically, very basically, sort of sorts out your emotional regulation. So no one really knows exactly why we dream. And that's why I find it quite interesting. If you watch a film and someone starts dreaming as soon as their head hits the pillow, I'm like, that's not very scientifically accurate, because we know, and most sleep science is only about 2 decades old, but we now know that dreaming tends to only happen in the second half of the sleep cycle. So it's the idea that we dream throughout the night is actually nonsense. So alcohol is the thing that inhibits the dreaming. And actually that means if you wake up after you've had quite a lot of alcohol, and it doesn't even need to be that much apparently, but if you wake up after a lot of alcohol and you feel really on edge, and for people like you and I who have, anxiety, that's massive. And I know now that if I have had too many martinis the night before and I feel anxious the next day, it's what we talked about on the last time we talked, Alex. At least you kind of know yourself, and you kind of tell yourself, I'm on edge because I know I haven't slept properly because I had one too many martinis last night.
Yeah. Well, and dreaming can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because one of the things that I dealt with, again, prior to a lot of my life, and more so, I would say, in my 40s, it got very bad, was night terrors. And I would wake up, and I'd wake up my poor wife again, screaming in the middle of the night, like, having some sort of horrible nightmare where something was attacking me, something was trying to kill me. And having, and I would ask friends, is that normal? And they were like, no, that's not normal at all. You really need help. You shouldn't be waking up screaming. And so, along with the CBT, the therapist was also helped me to deal with the night terrors as well, because that was kind of happening at the same time. And also, part of the reason why I didn't want to go to sleep, I was terrified of having night terrors. I was terrified of going to sleep and waking up, screaming because I had some horrible dream. And she was also able to help with that as well. So that's why I say therapy is so, so important. If you are having any of these issues, if you're having any of these problems, bad dreams, night terrors, insomnia, you really, really need to get into therapy. It is one of the most valuable things I've ever done in my life. The CBT, the interesting thing about CBT, and is that one of the things that they do for you is that you go through the therapy with homework, and they make you do what's called a sleep log, and you're supposed to write through, like, every day of the week, what time do you go to bed, what time do you turn out the lights, how long does it take you to fall asleep, how many times did you wake up in the middle of the night, how long were you awake, what is your final wake up time, what time did you get out of bed, how many hours did you, and you do this for every day of the week, and you fill it out. Then they also ask you, for the same days, write negative sleep thoughts for that day. Write positive sleep thoughts for that day. And you have to write them right next to each other. The negative sleep thoughts and the positive sleep thoughts. And you put them, for that day, I had these negative sleep thoughts. What can I write that's positive about sleep?
So would that be, just checking my understanding, would that be something that you think, so when you're awake during the day, you when you think about sleeping that night, is that sort of what you're thinking about going to sleep? Is that right?
You do this as soon as you wake up.
Oh, okay.
As soon as you wake up, you say, okay, what were your negative, what were your negative thoughts? What were your positive thoughts? And you do that every day. And eventually you'll see the negative thoughts start to diminish and the positive thoughts start to increase.
Right.
And that's what they're trying to do. Is they're trying to change your brain and change your frame of reference. CBT was very interesting. There's a great book written by one of the creators of CBT, this Greg Jacobs. And this was another book given to me by the therapist, and I had to go through this, and gives you a lot of exercises in here as well. Where it's all about changing your frame of reference about sleep. Because one of the reasons why you have insomnia is that your frame of reference is just off. It's wrong. You have wrong thoughts. What's interesting is this guy was a Buddhist. And he took the technology from Buddhist technology to create cognitive behavioral therapy. Essentially, cognitive behavioral therapy is Buddhist technology.
By the end of this series, but by the end of this series, Alex, you'll have converted me to Buddhism. I know this by now.
Not my goal. That's a no-no in Buddhism. I'm not allowed to proselytize. But it is interesting that the technology part of it is what CBT is based on. And it's also about, like I said, it's about reframing your relationship with sleep and what you think about it. So they try to sort of, turn the tables on all the negative things that you've been thinking. Thank you, Matt Walker. And try to reframe it into more positive things about sleep. One of the things that they stress over and over and over again is no one has ever died from lack of sleep. Not really. No one has actually died from a lack of sleep. And eventually everybody falls asleep, no matter what. And then if they died from a lack of sleep, it's really from another cause.
Okay.
And the lack of sleep was a part of it, but it wasn't the lack of sleep that killed them.
We'll take this up. We'll take this up with Matthew Walker then.
Yeah. Well, let's get Greg Jacobs and Matthew Walker and put them into a head and see what they say. It doesn't mean that lack of sleep doesn't have negative effects. It has a lot of negative effects. Trust me, there's plenty. And what Matt Walker says is absolutely true. But will it kill you? Probably not. And understand that it won't.
There's a really reassuring bit in, I'm just trying to find the exact quote here from Russia with Love, where there's so many references to sleep in the sleeper train sequence, appropriately enough, in From Russia with Love, not the only sleeper train sequence in Bond, obviously, but probably the most prolonged of all. And they're constantly battling exhaustion during that sequence because they're fine. It's obviously a nerve-wracking experience. But then Kerim Bey does actually say, and this is also a guy earlier in the story who'd said to Bond about killing Krylenko, I cannot sleep until I've killed that man. So clearly another Fleming character with an interesting relationship with sleep. But on the train to Bond, he says, have no fear, James. We will defeat these people. Go to your girl. We will meet again in the morning. We shall not sleep much tonight, but that cannot be helped. Every day is different. Perhaps we shall sleep tomorrow. So it's reassuring Bond that as exhausted as he is, he knows that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And when he actually meets Grant later on, Bond says, it's like From Russia with Love, it's this whole prolonged sleep deprivation sequence on the train, which is, I think, one of the things that makes it so tense, particularly in the book. And he actually says to Grant before he realizes he's a villain, I'm going to sleep for a week when we get home. So that's probably the most exhausted Bond gets in any Bond story. But it's also quite reassuring because we know that we all go through those periods in life where you don't have, like, not last week, but the week before, I had so much on with work and Bond stuff and everything else. I think I averaged about 4 hours sleep a night that week.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it does take its toll kind of on your cognition. I
Oh, yeah.
felt by the Friday I was sort of wading through, felt like I was wading through treacle, mentally, to get, some kind of clarity of thought. But then I've caught up since, and feel a lot fresher. And I know that there's debate around this as well, but you don't really kind of pay a sleep deficit, but you do, we know that a period of not sleeping as much is not going to do you irreparable harm.
No. 3 times in my life, I was in the film business for 25 years before I switched to doing martial arts. 3 times in my 25-year film career, I had to stay awake for 3 days, 2 nights, 3 days straight, 72 hours working.
Wow.
Nonstop. The first time I was very young, I was like 18, 19. I did a Tales from the Dark Side. It was a TV show here in New York. Episode. Yeah, we had to shoot the whole thing in a weekend. So everybody was awake for 3 days straight. Everybody. The second time I had to do storyboards for a film, he finished the script several days before shooting began. So he's like, we have the weekend to storyboard this. And I'm like, are you kidding? No joke. I was up literally three days drawing.
Wow.
And the third time was on a Korean miniseries where I was assistant to the producer, and he just had a lot of things, and I had to take care of it. And for whatever reason, I was up again 3 days, 2 nights, 3 days straight. Yeah, and then following that, I would be able to sleep, but whoo, did it take a toll? It was just brutal. Eventually, I couldn't do filmmaking anymore. It was killing me. But I know what you're talking about. And I used to pride myself that I used to be able to do that. Well, I don't have to sleep anyway. I've got insomnia. I can work all the way through. And I took it as a badge of honor. Now I look like I was insane. I must have been insane.
I feel like the same way in a way, because in my 20s I was a bit more of that mindset, and it's a bit of a Gustav Graves mindset in Die Another Day, time to sleep when you're dead, and
yeah, exactly.
A character who is quite literally going insane because if he wasn't already, because he's had a DNA transplant, which means he's technically incapable of sleep. But interestingly, he has a dream machine, which means he's getting the emotional, or at least a little bit, not much, a bit of the emotional regulation side of things. But that character is quite literally, that is there, he's got many kind of tics and character traits, but that's one of them. He literally isn't sleeping, so he's getting progressively more insane. Not a good role model.
No, not a great role model at all. But yeah, it's just it was, again, setting the stage for anxiety, depression, you name it. It wasn't healthy. And and even now it's still, I can tell when I haven't had enough sleep, you get a little more irritated, and you get a little more anxious, and all that kind of stuff. So it definitely still does take a toll. So now that I'm trying to wean myself off of melatonin, I'm not getting the same quality sleep that I was with the melatonin. I do see a different impact. Eventually, I'm hoping that it will self-regulate, and we'll see.
It's interesting what you say about taking forms of medication. In Fleming's day, based on the Bond books at least, it appears to have just been the norm that people took sleeping pills. The amount of references to sleeping pills throughout the whole of Fleming is actually, again, I went through all 14 books to find all the references to sleeping pills, and there are a lot. And so I won't bore people to tears going through them now, the risk of putting people to sleep. However, Vesper uses sleeping pills, and obviously, very sadly, uses sleeping pills to actually end her own life at the end of Casino Royale. And in Live and Let Die, Bond himself starts using sleeping pills. He also does it in Moonraker to try and clear his mind after the card game. And he carries on and on and on. probably the most interesting reference to sleeping pills actually then happens in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, where he's trying to understand why Tracy is having mental health difficulties. And he goes through kind of the list of likely suspects. And one of them is drug usage. And he said she's not taking drugs. She's not even taking sleeping pills. Like, but it's written in such a way that you would expect any young woman to just have a tube of sleeping pills on her, in the bathroom, but she doesn't even have that. So it's almost like this normalization of using medication to assist sleep throughout the whole of the Bond novels. And then you've got the opposite. So Bond also takes amphetamines quite a lot in the Bond novels, and so does Le Chiffre in Casino Royale. He uses an inhaler, which they were actually made illegal in the early 1960s, but you used to be able to have Benzedrine, the brand name for amphetamines. You used to be able to have those to inhale, which is obviously turned into an aspirin inhaler in the film version. Well, we assume it's an aspirin inhaler in the film version. So Bond is constantly kind of manipulating his sleep cycle by giving himself uppers and downers in the Bond books. So he's actually quite heavily medicated in the books.
Better living through chemistry. That was that era. That was very common for, doctors to prescribe Valium for women because they were considered, hysterical.
Yeah.
So that that's a lot of that was the time period, the 1950s, 60s. These drugs were new. They were like, considered wonder drugs. And wow, now you don't have to suffer. You can just take a pill, take a pill, take a pill. Now we know, now decades later, we know that, long-term usage of these pills can be very, very destructive. And so, again.
So even more instrumental for you, far more instrumental. So if I've understood, is there anything else about the CBT that you think is really important? So the sleep hygiene is massively important. Having that routine to kind of switch your brain onto, right, now is the time to go to sleep. That's mega important. But again, not worrying too much. We all have the odd late night here or there. A late night for me is about 9:30. Whereas for some people it's more like 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, the start of Casino Royale, the very start of Casino Royale, Bond is up at 3 in the morning. He also kind of likes doing night duty. So I think I'm trying to remember which novel it is now. I'm pretty sure it's Thunderball. No, it's Goldfinger. It's Goldfinger. So Bond is very much a night person anyway. So we all have, but that's 3 a.m. is a late night for anybody. So sleep hygiene is really important. Understanding your positive and negative thoughts on awaking is really important. And Bond has some really interesting episodes with having really bad thoughts. So particularly in Live and Let Die, where he has essentially a panic attack in having a terrifying encounter with giant squids and stingrays. And he just sweats his way through the night. So understanding the positive and negative thoughts on waking is really important. Is there anything else to the CBT that you think is worth sharing?
Well, not so much the CBT. I think we if you are dealing, if one is dealing with insomnia, literally they've done tons of studies. CBT is the most effective. They say they hesitate to use the word cure. I say it is a cure. I'm going to say it is a cure for insomnia, CBT, and probably the only one that's really effective. But the other thing is understanding your chronotype.
Yeah.
And that becomes very important too, because that takes a lot of the sting out of it.
Yeah.
So we in the West, we have this idea, early to bed, early to rise. The real functional people are the guys who go to bed at 10 o'clock and they wake up at 5 o'clock. And, that's the best way to be. And then you start. Good for you. And you exercise. I remember when I was making that transition from film to martial arts, I was managing a gym. I had to be at the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning. I had to be up at 4:30. A lot of times when I was doing movies, I had to do the same hours. You have to be on set by 5:30. You have to wake up at 4:30. And I was just a mess. And then I would see these people working out at 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning and just killing it and then getting on with their day and how great they were. It was a time I tried to work out at that era, and it was just complete rubbish. I could not work out. It was the worst workout that I ever had. and I was just completely listless. I couldn't do it. I was so messed up in those hours. I was so and as much as I tried to train myself, go to bed earlier, go to bed earlier, go to bed earlier, do it gradually, do it gradually. It just wouldn't work. And then I heard about chronotypes, and chronotypes are a discovery that they realized that you are born with a certain chronotype, and it's a genetic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how much you try to change your chronotype, it's not going to happen. You are, unfortunately, it's like having red hair or, well, now gray hair, black hair. It is what it is. And I know when I was, and then it was literally sort of just sort of getting, familiar with what the chronotypes are and accepting it. And they have, they did something very creative where they broke it up into animals, like the lion chronotype. That's about 15% of people. We touched on this before. Those are like early to bed, early to rise, get everything done. You're a morning person. A lot of them happen to be, these A-type personalities, and they're very effective and whatnot. And then you have, the bears, and they're sort of in the middle. That's most people. They don't go to bed too late. They don't wake up too early. You go to bed around 11-ish, wake up around 6, 7-ish, and that also is that's about what they say, about 55% of the people. That's where most people are. And then you have the wolves, night owls. I go to bed easily at 2 a.m. and I'll fall asleep like a baby. Now, when I tried to go to bed earlier, like at midnight or 11 or 10, I would get maybe 3-4 hours sleep if I was lucky. And then I would wake up at like in the middle of the night, and I couldn't get back to sleep. And it was just a complete waste of time. And I struggled for years and years because society told me you have to go to bed early. When I was a kid, when I was going to high school, they make you go to high school like 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
You're a teenager when you need the most sleep. So I'm going to bed, like I can't really fall asleep until midnight. I'm waking up at like 5:30 to get to school at like 7:30. And it was a nightmare for me. It was an absolute nightmare. And we're working in the movies as well. If I had a 5 o'clock call, I had to be asleep by 10 o'clock. It's not happening. So I usually ended up with maybe 3-4 hours sleep when I had those early calls. When I was working at the gym and I had to be at the gym at 5 a.m., again, every day I would have maybe 3 or 4 hours sleep at best. Mm-hmm. Finally, I told the owner, I said, listen, you got to switch me to the afternoon shift, where I come in at 3 and I'll stay until 11. And I was unbelievable. It was the change was amazing. I was so much more productive. I was so much more awake. I was so much more on top of things. I was so much more aware. And then I had my time for my own workout. My workouts were spectacular. Now, when I was training in martial arts, the martial art class was at 7 p.m. So we would go from 7 to 8:30, and then I would add another half hour till 9 o'clock, go home, have dinner, sleep like a baby, come back and do the whole thing over. I was in my element. When I was, again, when I said Spanish culture, you're up until, past midnight, most Spanish people, and same thing in Greece. You're eating dinner around 9 o'clock. I remember going to Greece a few years ago, and we went to a restaurant at 8 o'clock. It was empty. I thought, oh, this must be a terrible restaurant. Well, by the time we were finishing dinner, the place was packed. by 8:30, 9 o'clock, the place was just completely full. So I was like, oh, yeah, no, the Greeks do it too.
I think, the percentages vary, don't they? I can't remember what percentages I cited earlier on, but I think a lot of people should take solace in the fact I am one of those irritatingly cheery people at 5 o'clock in the morning. Sorry. Sorry. I do apologize to people I work with, because I'm even working in education where, I'm usually in whatever office I'm in that day by about 7 o'clock in the morning. So my work day starts at 7 o'clock. So because that's when my brain works best. But
Yeah, good for you.
I know I'm in the minority, but it's quite interesting
Well,
how much of
you're
society.
15%. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're in 15%. I'm in 15%. 15% are you, 15% are me, and then everybody else
everyone
is
else. It's quite
no.
interesting though how much of society is geared around being probably the majority, to be honest. But particularly in education, anyway, it's geared towards morning. People being up quite early. I'll be honest.
Well,
Sometimes at weekends, I get a bit frustrated because I'm like, I've already been up for 3 hours. Why are the shops not open? Why, I feel I feel out of sync with the rest of the world
yeah,
because I'm always up really early. But at the same time, I'm like, if I'm going to the theatre, I'll always try to book a matinee performance because I'm thinking
yeah,
I'm not going to be awake at 10 o'clock when this play
yeah,
finishes, or
yeah,
later than that. What am I doing? It's like we're going to a midnight premiere of a movie on Wednesday this week.
yeah.
And so we've actually booked a hotel near the cinema because I
Why are
know
you torturing yourself?
I'm gonna have to go to I'm gonna have to go to sleep and then wake up to go to the film at midnight because I won't make
Why?
midnight. I'll just fall asleep.
Why would you torture yourself like that?
I know. Just as you do try. It's interesting what you say about different cultures though, because I do wonder, particularly you mentioned Greece and Spain, very sunny countries, slightly longer daylight hours. I do wonder how much of that is tied. I don't know have any scientific backing here, but tied to circadian rhythms, which we haven't mentioned at all, but are
Well, this is about
massively
circadian
important.
rhythms.
Yeah.
The chronotypes has everything to do with your circadian rhythm and understanding that everybody's circadian rhythm is different.
Mm,
Nobody has the same circadian rhythm. Your circadian rhythm is pretty much
set.
kind of genetic. It's in you at birth, and that's what you're going to be. Now, when I went to Spain a few years ago with friends, my friends were like you. This other couple, they were in bed by 9, 10 o'clock. They were up at 5:30. My wife is from Taiwan. Taiwan also has a very similar sleep cycle like Spain and Greece, where they're up, they have night markets. So they go out at 11
Mm.
o'clock at night, hit this night market, and they're eating, all these meals at late at night. And so Taiwan also has that kind of late night culture. She's another night owl. So, if 10 o'clock came around, I'm up. I'm like, let's go to another bar. Let's go to another place. Let's go. They're dragging their asses. When I was in Spain, I never felt healthier. I never felt more awake. I never felt more alert. I never felt more in my element than ever in my life before. I was literally in it like, oh, this is Alex land. This is where I belong. And I literally, like, everything clicked. Every system I had in my body made sense. Every synapse was firing perfectly. I was completely in my element. And this is a country I had been to for a little, for like a few weeks as a teenager, and I had, and I was where I was born. I spent the first year of my life, but I was only like a year or so old when we came back from Spain.
But your
Um,
circadian rhythm will have been influenced by that. So the reason that babies don't, not all babies, but a lot of the reason babies don't, not all babies sleep through the night is because their circadian rhythms aren't actually set. So just in case anyone's thinking, what the hell's a circadian rhythm? And again, please correct me if I've got this wrong, Alex. But essentially, it's tied with daylight. A lot of the, so the best way to explain it to people, I think, is if you've ever had jet lag, which I have
mm,
absolutely brutally every time I go anywhere. So,
mm,
and it's so rigid. Like, if I've been to a country which is 9 hours behind, it will
mm,
take me 9 days, an hour getting closer to my normal body clock every night. It will take me 9 days to recover from jet lag. It is that
wow,
precise. My
really?
circadian rhythm is that
Wow.
rigidly set that
Mm,
that yeah, jet lag completely messes me up. So when I go on holiday to Japan, I spend the first week of the holiday just basically dragging myself through. It's worth it, but I basically wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning and can't get back to
oh
sleep.
wow.
Yeah, it is absolutely brutal.
Oh
And
wow.
I never have to use, and funny enough, this is something else I've forgotten that James Bond does. James Bond doesn't set an alarm clock. He sets a mental alarm clock, and it never lets him down. I'm trying to remember which novel it's in. I'll find the exact reference in a minute. But in one of the novels, he does set a mental alarm clock for 7 o'clock in the morning, and he wakes up exactly at that time. I do set an alarm just in case, but it never goes off because I know that I'm going to wake up just before the alarm goes off.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I wake up pretty much consistently around just before 8 o'clock every morning. So between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, I'm 9 times out of 10 I'm awake before my alarm clock. But I go to bed consistent. Here's another thing about the sleep hygiene. Find your chronotype, find your circadian rhythm, understand what that is. Completely accepted no matter what society says. Also, try to adjust your life and lifestyle where that makes sense. Now, I have a lifestyle now where I'm not doing film anymore. I don't have a call time. I'm set my own hours. I work for myself. So now I can go to bed when my circadian rhythm, when my body says. Is it tied to sunlight? Maybe I guess so, but I'm not sleepy until way after sundown, and I'm awake way after sunup. But you have to understand what your circadian rhythm is, completely accept it, and try to adjust your lifestyle to whatever that may be. Early riser, late light riser, middle, whatever. There's another one I don't want to get into, the dolphin, and they're kind of all over the place. They change their things. One of the blessings is that I don't suffer from jet lag. I can go to Asia, no problem. The problem is I usually don't sleep on the plane. I'll stay awake the entire time. Yeah. When I get to the destination, I go to bed at the normal time. Completely adjusted.
That's what I do. That's what I try to do. That's the always best way to beat jet lag, isn't it? Just set watch to the local time and just try to live the days to that schedule.
I've never really suffered from jet lag because that's what I've always done. Not saying that's a recommendation. I'm not saying that it's a recommendation, but finding what your circadian rhythm is and adjusting your lifestyle and whatever society tells you this is what you should do, you forget it. Find what yours is and adjust your lifestyle to that. That's super important.
I think that's a common theme throughout mental health, isn't it? Actually, stop comparing yourself with other people, and a lot of the time you'll actually just be happier.
And trust me, some of the wealthiest, most successful people were night owls. They stayed up, late and woke up late. So it's kind of a myth. Is it?
So, do you want to know? Nice? Do you want to know what type James Bond is? So I found the exact quote. It's from Moonraker. So he forced sleep to come into his teeming mind. Bond visualized the figure on the dial of the clock and left it to the hidden cells of his memory to wake him. The extrasensory alarm clock did not fail him. Punctually at what time do you think James Bond always wakes up in the morning?
I don't remember.
I'll give you a clue. It's an app number.
It's an app number. I don't know, 8 o'clock?
For James Bond. You're going to kick yourself.
Okay. Tell me. I don't know.
7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. 1 hour. That's good. So he's maybe a bear.
He's a bear. He's a normal type, isn't he? I suppose.
The normal person. He's a normal type person.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. I might have thought he might be a night owl, but
it's as ever with Bond, it's always kind of contradictory, and you can read into it whatever you want, because there is that great line in Doctor No, isn't there, where M, who for some bizarre reason is also in his office at 3 o'clock in the morning, says,
aren't they always like in their offices at 3 a.m.?
I know. It's like, doesn't he say to Bond, when, I might get the quote slightly wrong, but when do you sleep, 007? And I was thinking, Bond
never on the company's time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Bond should turn around to M and say to him, respectfully, sir, when do you sleep? Because I'm like, who's in the office at 3 in the morning?
Yeah. So, but that is important. And then also, like I said, the sleep hygiene. getting a routine, winding down.
Mm.
I have a good sleep routine. I do more, I was joking even last night, like I do more prep to go to bed in the last hour than I do all day to doing anything. This is a whole ritual that I have to go through of all these different steps. I'm like, there's so many things I got to do just to get myself to go to bed.
So,
And
what is your ritual, Alex? Share it with us.
well, like I said, 10 o'clock, I'm cleaning the place like a dynamo.
Mm-hmm.
I tell everybody, I tell my wife and do not clean up, leave it for me. So that gets me sort of getting rid of that
Yeah.
extra energy. Then I shower at night. I've always showered at night.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have to shower in the morning. That's fine. I find washing the day off me at night helps me sleep. Brushing teeth, you know, moisturizing, shaving, all that stuff. Just the normal things. But it's just you think about it, and there's just a lot of steps to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, just again, getting the room the right temperature, fixing the bed the right temperature, putting down the screens, and then picking up the book and reading. Usually lately it's been James Bond. Now I've been just starting, I'm just finishing a couple of the continuation novels. So I just finished Forever and a Day.
Mm-hmm.
So
I always have to read before bed. No matter how tired, that's part of my sleep hygiene. No matter how tired I am, and no matter how many martinis I've had, I will still have to read. Even if I only manage a paragraph, I will still have to read before bed. And it's something I've done since I've been about 7 or 8 years old. And it is probably, out of everything you've just said, cleaning teeth and whatever, very important. I promise I do clean my teeth every night. But even more important than that is having just doing a little bit of reading, not checking your phone. I don't understand why people have TVs in bedrooms personally, because if I was to watch TV before bed, I don't think I'd ever get to sleep. But reading before bed is just so important to me.
Yeah. Oh, I've done it for many, many decades since through college. I've been doing that. Even with the dyslexia, if I can get through a whole page, that's a good night. If I'm reading like maybe a chapter, maybe not such a good night. But get through a few paragraphs and then all of a sudden I'm out.
To be honest, that's the savior. If I do have a really bad night and I can't sleep and I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 in the morning, I
read a good book.
I read and I read until because if you've got loads of positive or negative thoughts, because they're not always negative thoughts at that in the middle of the night. Sometimes they're ideas for things. I have creative ideas in the middle of the night, and I'm just like, sometimes, guys, can you just leave me alone, please? I actually just want to go to sleep. So I have to write all those down, and then I have to calm myself down by doing some reading, and then that's what gets me back into sleep mode.
Yeah, and for me, something like a fantasy like James Bond is great. I used to read comic books when I was younger as well. Not that much younger, actually. I was reading comic books were good because, again, it was just completely divorced from reality. So it just took my brain and just calmed it down. I was like, I wasn't thinking about anything. They would say, "Oh, but those are so exciting and this and that." I'm like, no, they're exciting, but they're so divorced from reality that my own real life is put aside, and I can just put it into this fantasy, whether it's a Bond novel or a comic book or whatever. It does quiet the brain because it kind of, not turn it off, but turn it down, so to speak. And then making sure light is also very important. Make sure you have like blackout windows if you need to wear an eye mask. That's another important thing.
The last thing I sort of wanted to kind of throw around with you was around, just going back, we touched on it a bit earlier, we're talking about hypervigilance. And I always have a real issue sleeping in a bedroom which is anything other than my own. So if I do have to stay in a lot of hotels for work reasons and bond reasons and that kind of stuff. And you know, sometimes it's better than others. But I know I have to take steps when I'm staying in a hotel, so I always have to wear earplugs, for instance, to kind of shut out any kind of noise, because a lot of people with anxiety, if you're in a place where you don't usually sleep, you'll take that sound that is probably very innocuous, you know, just someone walking down a hallway, but your mind will spin it into something else. So I have to block out audio a lot, and it has to be completely blackout. I can't sleep with any light in the room. What you were just saying about light, so important. So I always book, whenever I book a hotel, I always have to take those steps. So I always say, funny, if this happened at weekend, I was like, I need to be in the room the furthest from the lifts. I need to make sure that the curtains close completely. And I'm a bit of a nightmare when I check into a hotel, I always check these things in advance, and it's not going to be noisy and all the rest of that. Does any of that kind of resonate with you?
Fortunately for me, I actually kind of sleep better in hotels.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because a lot of hotels are designed to kind of, you know, they all have blackout curtains. You can turn the air conditioning way up and get it really.
You might be used to that in the US, Alex.
Oh, okay.
Here in the UK, it's a bit hit and miss, let's be honest.
That's true. I've been in the UK a few times, and they don't always have air conditioning.
No.
And I was there for a summer wedding once, and that was an issue. It was in an old manor, and there was absolutely no air conditioning whatsoever. So, but generally speaking, like one of the best nights I ever had was on a Caribbean island. We opened the doors to the ocean. I got the ocean sounds. I got the ocean breeze. It was pitch blackout because there was no light pollution. And it was during the time where I was having issues. But I just recall staying in this one particular place, getting the greatest night's sleeps of my life because of the conditions were just so perfect. So I don't really have it's so funny. I've always had more of an issue sleeping at home. If something's off, then then I'll have like if something's off at home, I have a problem. If something's off at a place where I'm at, I don't live there. So for some reason, my brain doesn't fixate it on as much. So I don't know. Everybody, like I said, everybody's different. Everybody has different issues. But just, you know, getting those basic principles and, you know, light, sound, coolness, staying away from screens at a certain time, staying away from alcohol at a certain time, staying away from caffeine after a certain time. Doesn't mean you have to cut them out. There's a time and place for all of that, you know. That's where it's important. And then, you know, dealing with what's ever going on in here. You know, because really the cause of insomnia is right here. That's the cause of insomnia. Something's going on in here that you got to deal with. Something's going on in here that you haven't addressed. Something's going on in here that you have an issue with that you've left unattended. And, you know, going back to what this whole series is about, you know, I had my teacher, my Kung Fu teacher, whom I loved as much as my own father and thought of him as a second father, an incredibly stoic individual. You would look at him and like nothing bothered him. The problem was his stoicism, again, going back to also some of the things that Natasha talked about, the stoicism was a double-edged sword because although outwardly he was very stoic and seemed very strong and very assured and very calm all the time, he internalized everything to the point where it ended up becoming testicular cancer and it killed him. And he died at 63 from cancer. And you could tell he was a guy that took on everybody's problems. He was extremely empathetic. He was extremely kind. And he carried everybody's burden as if it was his own. And he never showed how much it bothered, what was bothering him. He never showed it. He never wanted to burden other people's with his issues or his thoughts. So he seemed like a very strong, capable, powerful, like this guy, nothing fazed him. But I could literally tell that he just internalized it all and carried it with him until it became a physical illness and came out as cancer. And that's a thing. That's real. That if you don't address these issues through therapy or some sort of means, it's going to find its way out some way. And a lot of that times comes out as a disease. If it won't attack you mentally, it'll attack you physically if you don't address it. So again, the cause of insomnia is in here. The cure for it is in here. You need to address these issues with a proper therapist and with proper attention.
100%.
And that's pretty much what I have to say about that. Well, this has been amazing.
Yeah.
And we've been on here for well over an hour.
I knew it was going. I knew it was going to be, Alex. I knew this was not going to be a short one. There's so much Bond stuff I didn't even go near.
Oh, I am
honestly
sure.
There is so Absolutely. Much in there, and I was just like, let's just connect it with our own experiences, the bits that are relevant. So yeah, and I thought it was really interesting because we are in some ways so similar, but also, you know, very different in terms of our in terms of the approaches to sleep as well. So I think that's really important for people to hear.
Yeah, because there's going to be very different ways and different ways to approach it. You got to find out what's right for you. You know, you got to find out what's the way that's going to help you, because everybody's going to be different.
Yeah, agreed. And that is, you know, people do beat themselves up by comparing themselves with other people. So that's I think that's so important for people to hear.
You cannot do that. You have to find your path. Everybody has their own path. You had your own path to these issues. You have to find your own path to deal with those issues. So that's the most important thing. And understand your path is your path. It's nobody else's.
Exactly. But I imagine there will be people who've listened to this all the way through, who've kind of like, you know, some of what either what you've said, I've said, or both of us have said has resonated with them, or at least has encouraged them to kind of look at things a little bit differently.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
That'd be great.